Alrighty, and we are live. We are here with Dr. Perry Nicholson. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, man, I'm really excited. I guess this is the third installment of the 0 Point Athletics platform of podcasting. We spoke about before the show. We've had a radio show for a while, but I really prefer this because the radio show is only an hour and there's commercial breaks and stuff. So you get it's almost like the news. Like you get all these little snippets, these little pieces. And the analogy I like to use is the idea of like the six blind men trying to figure out what an elephant is. So it's like,
Yeah.
you get this, oh, it's a tree trunk or it's a snake. And, you try to fill in the dots. So the longer format I've always enjoyed, because for me, if I can't actually fully grasp or understand a concept, it might send me down some wormholes where I learn more, but I really enjoy being able to just get it all in one place and from someone who I trust and who has the knowledge and the background. And for everyone watching this, if you're following 0 Point Athletics or Divergent Therapeutics, I guarantee you're already following Stop Chasing Pain on Instagram, because I share your stuff probably on a daily basis.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think it's that important. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. So is there anything before we start, because I've been realizing that kind of switching the natural narrative that comes up in me has been resourceful. So is there anything that you would like to ask me before I get into the things that I'd like to ask you?
No, man, I'm good. I'm pretty, like we were talking about before the show, I'm pretty organic on how conversations go and open to most things. So let's rock and roll. We'll get into it. I'll try to say some things that might make sense every now and then.
Yep. I feel the same way, dude. All right. So the first thing that I wanted to ask about, and you go into great depth with this, with the body aquarium and the lymphatic mojo. And I love that word mojo, and we'll probably talk about that. And also, I really like the word aquarium, but there's an extra question there for it. But they're really talking about how, our bodies are systems of pressure and fluid and these helical tubes, and there's a lot going on, and there's all these different systems that we've identified, which are really just different fractal iterations of the human being, the totality of that system. And some systems get a lot more attention than others. And again, that's one of the reasons why I was magnetized to you, because I mean, I remember back in the day when Thomas Myers started talking about fascia, everyone's like, oh my God, there's like a new system. Is it real? Is it not real? And it's like, you're kind of doing the same thing with lymph, because muscles, you can feel them, you can see them, bones, like they're tactile, but like nervous system, fascia, lymph, they're almost like this kind of abstract, more esoteric, ephemeral component of who we are. So in short, sweet terms, or whatever works best for you, what is the role of the lymphatic system and immunity? Because I'll give you my one sentence understanding. It is the system of the body that takes garbage out and groceries in. And taking the groceries in, I look at as yin, and taking the garbage out, I look at as as a yang component of it, because everything's polarized. So that's my 2 cents on that. But if you want to talk about lymph and our immune system for a moment, feel free to go ahead and just elaborate on that.
Yeah, that's a really great way to put it. Honestly, it's pretty much like that. And it's interesting you brought up Thomas Myers. I mean, he's a friend of mine, and he's been on my podcast a couple of times. And I actually call, when I teach about lymphatics, I call the lymph the new fascia. And what I mean by that is that, like you referenced before, it used to be a time when we didn't really think very much of fascia. It was just something that nobody paid attention to, or when surgeons would go in to try to get to some target tissue that they want to address or remove, they would just simply cut through it as irrelevant tissue, which I don't think anything in the body is irrelevant, otherwise it wouldn't be there. And they would just go right through it, and then, okay. And then we just had this new perspective, this new lens that we look through. And he was like an outlier that figured that there's more to this than just being tissue you can cut through. And I'm thinking lymph is the same thing, where it's something that we don't really pay that much attention to. And it's something that we don't even really regard as very important, and nobody ever talks about it. Now all you ever hear about every single sentence in therapy is fascia, fascia, fascia. And my goal is to do that with lymphatics. And I've started to make a mark on that the last couple of years, which is great, using the platform that I'm on. And it's nice to see it talked a lot more about in research. And especially when you're dealing with immune system issues, it's very important, because the lymphatic system is actually a significant part of your immune system and your ability to fight off toxic things in your world. So the lymphatic system is basically the sewage system of your body. It takes stuff that you don't want in there out. And that includes anything that you could possibly think of. Toxins of all types, man-made toxins that you can't even count anymore. Then you've got bacteria, viruses, parasites, fungus, but you've also got internal toxins, and that's the toxins that your body puts out just by the nature of it dying every day and regenerating every day, because you have billions of cells that naturally die every day, and then you regenerate and you make new ones. That's called life, right? And you have to get rid of that metabolic waste so you can function. And if that system becomes dysfunctional, and that can happen just from neglect, or you're just overloaded with stress, or you're so toxic that you can't catch up with things, then the body gets overburdened with its ability to function well, because it's too toxic. And when you're too toxic, you can't actually get nutrients into the body, even though you take nutrients in, and you do that primarily through what you stick in your mouth, right? What you eat, but also the nutrient of oxygen, what you breathe in through your nose and your mouth. But those are great, but they don't make much difference if they can't get to the target cell they're trying to reach. If they can't get there, it doesn't matter what you put in. And the system that makes that possible, for all those nutrients that you put in your body and all that oxygen that you're breathing, is the lymph. If that guy doesn't work well, no other system in your body will work as efficiently as it's designed to. I mean, it's that important. It's so important that if it stopped working altogether, you would be dead in one day. That's really, that's high up on the scale of, man, that's probably important to how my body works. And what happens is that it becomes dysfunctional, and then it deteriorates slowly over time. And then people get all these things where they feel terrible all the time, get all these diseases, or tired, fatigue, brain fog. You put whatever label you want on it, they're all the same thing. They're all caused from the same thing, which is underlying inflammation. And that system is a fundamental part of long-term recovery. If you don't address that, you're only going to get so far. And I'm a testament to that, because it started with me and my own autoimmune disease and illness that I was dealing with for many, many years without help. And traditional medicine tried to help me through their paradigm and damn near killed me, not on purpose, but it's just like, that's what they do. You know, I mean, this is what we got. This is what we do. And I'm like, well, thank you very much, but it ain't working. And if it doesn't work, then they're like, okay, well, I don't know what else to do. And then you gotta live with it, which is a bullshit answer that I refuse to settle for. And then I just discovered the lymph through my own journey of trying to find answers of why I was so sick. And when I found it and started to implement some of the techniques, and I've added to it over the years based on my long journey of being in healthcare, studying pain science, neuroscience, emotion-based science, Eastern medicine, Western medicine. I mixed all those things that I've learned in the prior journey to what I learned with lymph to make something I think is pretty damn cool with the lymphatic mojo. And I just did some techniques, and I felt 60% better in 2 days. Yep. And I was blown away about how much better I felt. And then I became really upset that nobody knew about this and nobody told me about this. And I knew that if I was struggling with this, and I'm in this industry, for goodness sakes, I mean, I should know it, that I know the general population person who's suffering without hope probably has no idea, because the doctors won't tell them, because they don't even have an idea themselves about the system, because they don't really cover it much in school. I think they spend like a half hour on the damn system and then just breeze on to the quote unquote other important ones. And so they don't even know to tell you that it's important. And even if they did, they wouldn't know how to take care of it. And then that's what I've devoted my life to, honestly, over the last 4 years since I became introduced into it, to begin to share that with every human being I could possibly think of. And it's just sort of taken a life of its own, because when people implement the techniques and they start to understand the system, they make significant improvements and changes in their body, because it's very simple, it's very practical. And the two things that most people tell me when they do it and they feel better is, one, they can't believe how simple it is to make that much of a difference when it's so simple. Because then they think, if it's so simple, why didn't somebody tell me this already? Because they're looking down the wrong lens. That's why. And then they're like me. They get really upset that nobody discussed this system with them, because everybody's too busy chasing the symptoms that they have, not looking at the systems, how all the body systems work together. Or they're chasing a diagnosis. They label you with something, and then you become that label, and then all of a sudden you're down this rabbit hole of despair, or there's nothing we can do for you, or everybody has to get the same damn treatment, which is absolutely ridiculous based on your diagnosis. And so every day I'm just trying to share my work on the lymphatics, and then have other humans become exposed to the power of this system, which is why I love talking about it every chance I get.
Awesome. Well, hopefully these will be stimulating questions for you then. So my understanding, which could be incorrect, so please correct me if I'm wrong, is, if we look at the way that we treat the immune system, and this directly relates with the situation that we're in as a planet right now, right? Because everybody's thinking about their immunity and what's going on with the virus. And so it's interesting, because the go-to when it comes to trying to prevent a virus or a bacteria has always really been a vaccine. The vaccine is usually supposed to be like the major answer, right? Well, the vaccine, the science that vaccines were fundamentally built off of is like 150-year-old science, because it's still based off of the idea that there is only the innate and the adaptive part of the immune system. So the innate, correct me if I'm wrong, but the innate immune system is kind of like, the hairs in your nose, like, all this like extrinsic, like your body armor, your skin, all those things that are kind of protecting you from the most superficial level from anything actually getting inside of you. And then once something does break through the innate immune system, then the adaptive immune system kicks in and starts to create antibodies and work with that in order to overcome it. So the idea with vaccines is, it's like, okay, well, why don't we just take a small dead or inert amount of what people are getting sick with? We bypass the innate immune system by injecting it into you, and then your body goes into this adaptive response that will hopefully prevent you from getting it. Well, that's evolved quite a bit, because what I've learned, or what I've been exposed to, is that there are actually quite a few different branches of the immune system. There's the innate, the adaptive, the interferoneuron, and the cytokine, which is like the inflammatory reaction or response that would happen after the adaptation, right? And then you have to consider the microbiome, the gut microbiome, and also the virome, which most people are not familiar with that idea or that term of the virome, where, viruses actually benefit us in a lot of ways. It just really depends on how our body interacts with it, the state of our metabolism and our immune system and all of that, because it'll actually make us stronger as long as our body's in the right state. So when it comes to the lymphatic component of the immune system, would that be that's kind of almost like all of them, because, you know, there's the interferon cytokine component. So when there is that inflammation, the lymphatic system helps to drain it and clear it out. There's, which allows the microbiome and the biome to be more healthy, which is reflected, you know, in your skin and in your eyes and in your teeth and in your tongue, which would be kind of more of that innate immune system, the first line of defense. So does the lymphatic system affect the entire immune system? Because I would argue that it does.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, you said it very well. I mean, it's a fundamental part of your immune system. It's a huge part of your body's ability to function in general. And it does, it's part of your innate one because you're born with it, and then it changes and it adapts to what it's been exposed to over your lifetime to become more resilient. So the thing that we need to understand about the immune system is it only becomes stronger when it gets exposed to bad stuff.
Yep. Yep.
So you're supposed to get sick, and then your body can recover from that, right? And then it recognizes it again through antibodies. But we are part of an ecological system within ourselves, but within the world. We would be dead if we didn't have bacteria that we interact with every day. Then we're mostly bacteria anyway. Mm-hmm. And we need that. And there's good bacteria and there's bad bacteria, and you need both. That's balance. That's yin and yang. But you also need viruses. I mean, there's more viruses in the universe than anything else, and they outnumber bacterium by a significant amount. Mm-hmm. And we would be dead without viruses as well. My fear now is that everybody's all this kill every germ thing you can think of with wiping down everything and chemicals. And then what they're doing is that they're not seeing the forest for the trees, and that in the quest to kill the COVID, you kill all the other ones too. Mm-hmm. And you're probably going to end up making your immune system weaker in the long run. So this is going to come back and bite us in the ass later from that. And so there's so many aspects to immunity where I see people who have chronic disease and autoimmune, which is a maladapted immune system. I don't believe in a dysfunctional immune system. I just believe it's maladapted. It's swinging too far one way or the other in its attempt to try to help you. It just gets stuck there. And a huge part of that is this lack of balance in their gut bacteria primarily, but their bacterial environment and what they're exposed to. And now what's quite fascinating is they're seeing a huge component of your immune system that's in the brain and what they call microglial cells that are far outnumber the neurons in your brain. They're microglia. They're part of your immune system. And when they get turned on, they become immune system warriors. And unfortunately, they can't be turned on. When you turn them on, they're on. They can't be turned off. So they're always looking to kill stuff. And unfortunately, that's your brain. So you have to learn how to tame them. But the glial cells are actually part of the lymphatic system as well, called glymphatics, glial lymphatics. And it was something that, honestly, it's been in your freaking head the whole time humans have been here. We just didn't see it until supposedly 10 years ago. But even that's correct, because it was discovered about 200 years ago by an individual. But just like everything else in medicine, if it doesn't fall into the current paradigm, you get ridiculed and you get pushed aside, and then they stuff it somewhere because they don't believe that it's true. But it was there 200 years ago. And then now all of a sudden they're starting to embrace it and say, okay, well, this is a huge part of your immune system. So if you're going to become, that's the age-old question, okay, that people have always asked. Why can you have 100 people in a room and somebody can sneeze and then 20 people get sick and then everybody else is okay? I mean, it's not the germ, it's not the virus, it's the terrain. Because if it was the germ of the virus, every single 100 of you would be sick, but you're not. So what's different? Well, it's hard to nail that sucker down because each person in the room has had their own history up to that point, right? But if you think about it from a logical standpoint and a common sense standpoint, what's the one system that's designed to fight off all that stuff? Your immune system. So somebody's immune system is stronger than another person's. Well, what makes it that way? It's definitely not your genetics, because genetics has very little to do with how, if you're going to get sick, if you're going to get well. It's a very small part compared to what they used to think it is, because a fly has more genes than you do, for goodness sakes. So we're not any more special than a freaking fly. It's not that. It's everything else that you're made of, your bacteria and your viruses and what you've gotten exposed to. But unfortunately, you only get exposed to those things when you go out into this thing that we call nature. And we're not around nature anymore. We're around stuff and toxins. And then I'm going to contend that one of the reasons people get sick in general is because they're actually too damn clean. Yep. Because they kill everything, and then they become more susceptible because you got a weak punk ass immune system, is what I tell them. You're only going to get stronger when you get your ass kicked, like a lot.
Yep.
And it's just, that was what they're trying to do with vaccines, where they say, okay, well, I'm not going to give you a lot of something because it might kill you, but let me give you a little taste of it so you can start to build up some immunity to it and resilience to it. The only bad part about that is they throw so many cocktails in that sucker that you don't even know what they're going to do with each other when they get into the human body. But that's its own debate of vaccinations, because that's a little polarizing, right? But you know, it's that classic argument that's been from germ theory to terrain. Which is it? Well, like everything in life, it's a little bit of both. It's just like no absolutes on anything. But I'm one of the guys who is the terrain guy, because I know that the environment that you're in makes a difference on if you're going to get well or not. And then they have a word for that too, called epigenetics.
Yes, sir. We're going to get into all this.
Epigenetics. And so, you know, that's huge. And I quote this all the time. I say, you cannot get well in the same environment you became ill within. So then my question is, if we're taking everybody and sticking them in their house and away from everything, we're not changing the environment at all. So when you go back out from this quarantine, why would you expect anything to be different when you go back out again? Because you didn't change anything.
Yeah. So a couple things, I resonated with so much of what you said. So I'm going to try to hit a couple key points. So one, the lymphatic system being kind of ubiquitous. And there was another thing that you said that really struck with me, where the lymphatic system and the fascial system and the nervous system and even your circulatory system, they kind of go everywhere. Like there's not anywhere in your body where there isn't those things, at least to some degree, right? And I was listening to one of your podcasts, and you talked about how, you know, when you say the word lymph, the first thing people associate that with is cancer, right? So if it gets into your lymph nodes, everyone's like, oh, you're screwed. So it's like, whoa, hold on. So if you have prostate cancer or brain cancer or whatever, and we just hit it with the right radiation and you do chemo, we can knock it out because it's like localized. But if it gets into the lymphatic system, all of a sudden it's everywhere. Well, that points to the fact that there is a very, very interconnected systemic relationship there that's not being understood and that's not being taken advantage of. And so one of a couple of the things that you said that stuck out to me is, you know, you use this kind of idea of an aquarium. Right. So with the idea of the aquarium, you're looking at your body as the fish tank, and then inside there's the fluids, and then, you know, the organs and all these other components are like the coral and the fish, and you can give them really good food and you can talk to them every day and tell them you love them and all that. And it's still good. You should still do those things, but you also have to change the filter, or just make sure the filter isn't at least clogged. Right. Well, I wanted to expand on that a little bit because I thought that was a beautiful analogy for people to start looking at their body through that lens. But what popped into my head when I heard you say that is I said, I got this visualization. I was like, okay, an aquarium. Well, an aquarium is made out of glass. So there's actually information from the environment outside of that aquarium going into the aquarium, like light frequencies, sound frequencies, electromagnetic frequencies, and you nailed it with the word epigenetics. Like, that's why I was just like, yes, let's talk about epigenetics, because it's one of those things where, like you said, I'm a terrain guy, and even Louis Pasteur on his deathbed said it's the terrain, it's not the organism, it's the terrain. Like, that was his final stance. He's like, I was wrong, it's not about the bugs, it's about the body. And so understanding that there really is no separation between us and our environment, and that the glass of that aquarium is almost an illusion, you know. It's the personality structure, it's identity, it's where our skin ends. But, like, you know, Taylor doesn't end here and you don't end there, because there's another connecting force between all of us. And if you're in Eastern medicine, you probably know where I'm going with all this stuff. So the environment, from, you know, the light frequencies, the electromagnetic frequencies, the emotional frequencies that we create, the morphogenetic fields, a collective unconscious, like, all these things are also still affecting the aquarium, you know. And there's that beautiful experiment by, I think he was a Japanese dude, I'll never remember his name, maybe you do, where they'll either speak to or write a word on water and then flash freeze it and look at the crystalline structure of it, right? So it's like, okay, well, if there's all this information that's actually going into the aquarium, because the boundary of the aquarium isn't really a boundary, it's a perceived boundary. So how are those things influencing what's going on in the aquarium? And the thing that's really interesting is when I saw this in my mind, the aquarium had an antenna on top of it. So the aquarium was giving and receiving information, right? So it's like, if your body's an aquarium, and you got to think about the fish and the coral and the filtering and the food and the lymph. I love all that. I think it's all great because it allows that antenna to receive and transmit information more clearly and coherently. And in my belief, that antenna was a representation of our brain. So if we're all these fish tanks all around the world right now, and we are in an emotional state of fear, and we're stressed out, then we're going to be transmitting that into the ether, into the collective consciousness. That's going to be affecting the health of everyone else's aquarium. So I just thought that that'd be interesting if you want to build on that at all or whatever, because the aquarium is such a cool visualization. But I think from my perspective, I got more out of it when I started to let go of the idea that the boundary of the aquarium was the glass, because the earth is just another giant aquarium.
Exactly. Well, I mean, the simple thing is everything affects everything, right? Nothing exists alone. That's why I talked about the ecological system, the ecology. Everything has to work with each other. And the aquarium in and of itself has the internal environment, but the internal environment is beholden to the external environment, and vice versa, right? So the skin in and of itself that you have, I mean, it's not a complete lock, stock barrier for everything. So you've got, the body can only function as well as the sensation that goes into it, right? And the things that go into it. What's interesting is that the number one thing that's exposed, the greatest surface area of your body that's exposed to the outside world is not your skin. It's actually your gut. So whatever you put in your mouth is one of the biggest things is going to affect your body. And it just so happens that the majority of your lymph lives just outside of your gut. Right? But that's the human condition. That's what makes us unique, is that we have this unique ability to have a thought process, this thinking complex in the front, this cortex in the front that I call the new brain. And then you've got this one here, you've got the second brain is this one. The first brain sits deeper, and that's that survival brain, that emotional brain. And that's the one that rules the road. We just try to tame it with this front one. And that's what it's designed for. Sometimes we do it well, other times we don't. But sometimes we're so jacked up because we just don't get out of our own damn way with the stuff that we're doing. And we're really smart on this prefrontal cortex, but we do a lot of dumb shit, and we make a lot of stuff that, you know, comes and will get you later in relationship to technology, from your 5G and your blue light and your toxins and 5 billion chemicals in one box of food, and not to mention all the horrific things that people willingly put on their skin to make themselves look better, that actually have innumerable toxins in there that mix with each other, that no lab is going to be able to tell you how this product with these chemicals are going to react with this product over here that we didn't even make, that you're putting on. You're going to come together and have this thing that you're creating that nobody's ever seen. I'm just amazed that anybody's still alive on this earth. I'm going to be honest with you, with what the human body has to put up with, the absolute horrific things that we do to it.
Oh, I think you're lagging out a little bit there. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Yeah. I was saying, I'm just surprised that anybody's still alive with what the human body has to put up with in relationship to what we do to it every single day. But that's the thing, is that you can't separate yourself from your thought process. You can't separate yourself from somebody else's thought process is going to influence what happens around you. I mean, that's just the way it works. That's quantum energy. That's the stuff that, you know, you've got Newtonian physics, which is kind of like A equals B. And then quantum physics is A can equal whatever the hell it wants to, whether you understand why it's going to give you that or not. And it doesn't really care whether you understand it or not. And Einstein, one of the smartest people on the earth, said, dude, I don't even know what that stuff is. He called it spooky action from a distance. It's just weird stuff that we can't even comprehend. And that's one of the things that I like to look at different disciplines, and I study astronomy and physics and stuff like that. And I had a quote once from the astronomer Neil deGrasse Tyson, if you know him, Neil deGrasse Tyson. And I was watching some interview with him. It stuck with me. And he said, the universe is under no obligation to make sense to you.
Yep.
And I said, dude, that is freaking brilliant. I love that. So I semi-stole that phrase, and I inserted the most amazing thing in the universe that we've yet to even comprehend how it works, the body. So now I say, the human body is under no obligation to make sense to you. And we can try every day to figure it out, but we think we have answers and we think we're right, but then we soon discover that we're completely freaking wrong on everything that we thought. It happens every day in medicine. Hence, fascia's no big deal. 2, you got no lymph in your brain until they go, oops-a-daisy, yes, you actually do, we just didn't see it. 2, the brain can't change itself. Once you got it, deteriorates and then you die. And then oops-a-daisy, we're wrong on that. You've got neuroplasticity and you can regenerate it and change it every single day until you die. So I think it's a complete arrogance of people in general, but definitely in the world of science, to think that they've got evidence and answers for everything. And just because they haven't found it yet doesn't mean that it still doesn't exist. Everything up to this point that we discovered was always freaking there. We just didn't see it yet. And you need to keep that perspective in mind in relationship to why stuff works or why stuff doesn't work. And then that's where mojo came from. People ask me, why did you use the word mojo? Well, 2 reasons. One, mojo is just a cool freaking word. But mojo means a couple of things. It means magic. It means the magic of making a difference in another person's life, or the magic of the human body to heal itself at any moment, and the magic of life. But it also means voodoo, which means, dude, sometimes I got no freaking idea why this stuff works. I just know that it works. And why can't you just check the win box and be okay with that, right? And so that's the beauty of it. And I also made it for a third reason, because in this industry of healthcare and pain and inflammation and science, everybody's so damn serious all the time. And then one of the things that you'll find is that people get sick because they don't have joy, they don't have happiness, and they take pain so seriously. But I read a quote once that stuck with me. It said, "There's zero correlation between appearing to be serious and actually being good at what you do." And so I thought, just because I'm using the word mojo or joking or something with when I make something doesn't mean that I don't take things seriously. I'm just trying to bring a little bit of air of fun to healing and pain, because I think one of the reasons that people might be in pain is because they don't have enough of that in their life. That's the emotional component to pain. And people ask me all the time, I mean, do you believe that emotion has a role in chronic pain? I'm like, yes, that's why you're not a rock. You're a human being, and how you think changes your biology. And they actually have a branch of study of that called psychoneuroimmunology.
Yep, Bruce Lipton.
Big fancy word that just says this: how you think affects your immune system and your nervous system, and all the other system. Because I say this all the time: no system in the body ever works alone. Never, ever, ever. It never gets injured alone, and it never heals alone. Never. But unfortunately in medicine, that's how we attack it. We attack the system that is got the problem, but we don't look at how all the other ones work with it, or it might actually be the fundamental underlying cause of why that system might be jacked up. So you're only strong and resilient as your weakest and your most vulnerable system, and it's not always the one that you have the problem with. That's what people need to understand.
Yeah, man. It's one of those things where, and I say this probably every interview and podcast I've ever done, where it's like, science is a microscope and a telescope, right? Whether you're looking at microbiology or astronomy, right? Mm-hmm. It's about looking at the smallest and the biggest. So we're trying to figure out where we sit on this spectrum in the universe, right? And I think there was this like kind of big downturn in innovation, at least integrative systemic innovation, when we started becoming overly specialized. So it's like, you're an ankle guy, or even if it was lymph, even though lymph is so integrated, like if you only thought about lymph, that might work for 90 people out of 100, but maybe those other 10 need some breathing work or some DNS or some Z Health or some PRI or whatever else,
Yeah.
And so, like, for me, what I enjoy doing, and for those of you who have listened to the shows and the podcasts, I'm always going to say this, is okay, the gift of the telescope and the microscope were profound, because it allowed us to use literally different lenses to see from a different perspective. Now, that's a beautiful thing. I love that we've been able to accomplish that. But if you don't take your eye out of the microscope and put it in the telescope, you're now a microscope specialist. Now you're a cell guy. You're a small person guy, right? And if you don't take your eye out of the telescope, you're an astrophysicist or whatever, right? And the thing is that I find really fascinating is these same exact principles and patterns are occurring at the macro and the micro, because when nature finds something that works efficiently, it just keeps repeating it over and over again in patterns that way. And so it's interesting, because one of the things that I wanted to ask you, because we talked about emotions a little bit and psychoimmunology. So I want your perspective or your background and your knowledge on a couple really direct questions. So first of all, are viruses alive?
Well, I'll preface it to say that I'm not a virologist, so I'm by no means an expert on that, right? But they're kind of like a parasite, and that they just wait for, they're opportunistic. They like to find stuff that they can take advantage of. That's what they do, right? Last thing they want to do is just chill out in somebody that's really, really strong, because they're going to get killed, right? And then, but when you look at viruses, when you actually get a virus, you never get rid of a virus. It never leaves your body. It's there. It's always there. You just might not have the symptoms of it because your immune system is always fighting it off. That's why many people who have very common virus that just kicks your ass, the Epstein-Barr virus, the EBV virus, the monovirus, right? You'll have that, and then medicine will tell you, oh, you don't have it anymore. Well, wrong. You actually do have it, and it can pop out and kick your ass 20 years later when you're under a lot of stress, because viruses are opportunistic when you're weak and vulnerable, and stress, chronic stress, weakens your immune system. Chronic stress is the #1 cause of chronic disease. Right? I'm not saying that's different than infectious disease. Infectious disease and chronic disease are not the same thing. And so it'll just take advantage of you because you're beaten down. And what you're going to find out that's happening right now, I'm seeing it, is that there's so much stress going on in the world because of what's going on with the COVID, of people just not knowing and uncertainty. And when you study the brain and neuroscience, you'll see that the biggest stressor on the human brain is uncertainty, not knowing. And so every system goes into freak out mode, fight, freeze, freak out, survival mode. And then you start to break down, and then the viruses go, oh, yippee, man, this guy's starting to break himself down. I'm just going to come out and take advantage of this environment. It's perfect for me. And then you have people that are getting flare-ups of prior infections that they've had, from an Epstein-Barr virus to a herpes virus to HPV virus. They'll get reoccurring symptoms of things, or they'll get reoccurrence of prior injuries they had 15 years ago where they had no pain from, and then all of a sudden things are starting to come back. Or people will manifest autoimmune diseases that'll hit them out of nowhere, because when you study the science of autoimmune disease, they tie them to the kickoff for an autoimmune disease is a very stressful life event, usually something like a death or, marriage or something like that that's ending. And then the body just hits this breaking point, and then it goes, right? So the immune system always comes down to the key on that. And then, so once you get these quote unquote vaccines, it doesn't mean you get rid of the virus from your system at all. It just means that your immune system is keeping it at bay, and then boom, it can flare up whenever the hell it wants to.
Yeah. So, to me, it makes the most sense for us to pay special attention to the people who we know are immunocompromised, which I think the number is astronomically higher than what we even think it is, because of how many people have insulin resistance and don't know, or other pre-existing conditions, or again, even just, chronic stress, anxiety, emotional stuff. I mean, that's what I deal with mostly on a regular basis. And so, I asked you if viruses are alive or not. And for me, and I could be wrong, this is just my perspective, my understanding, is that viruses are really just like a sequence of information. It's almost like RNA, but it's not like a living, sentient life form. It's just looking for something to lock onto in order to have a synergistic relationship. And then maybe at that point, you could argue it's alive because it's now interacting with a biological thing, which I'm not sure of. So if we're operating under the assumption that there is this living, invisible, heinous bug that's everywhere all the time, it's trying to kill us, it's hunting us down, that's going to continue to, through auto-suggestion, I mean, in your subconscious mind, you're telling yourself, I'm not safe, the world's not safe, I can't trust anybody, everyone, I got to have my mask, I got to have my gloves, I got to have all these things. And like you pointed to earlier, being inside, not moving around as much, not getting in the sun. Well, when things do kind of reopen again, and people start going out, they're most likely going to be even more susceptible and more immunocompromised from the social distancing and things of that nature. So what steps would you be taking preemptively to prepare yourself? Because it's bound to happen, man. There either we're going to be stuck in quarantine and there's going to be a police state, or whatever you want to call it, state of emergency for so long, people are going to go crazy, and then that's going to be even worse than what COVID would have done. Or we're going to have to start systematically letting people go back to normal daily living. So I'll give you my 2 or 3 quick little things, and then I'd love to hear yours, because I want people to be able to feel empowered with the understanding of what a virus is, and why you really shouldn't be afraid of it when you know how you can improve your mitochondrial function, your immune function, your metabolic function, so you can literally, have someone sneeze right in your face and laugh because it just made you stronger, type of thing.
Yeah.
So what I've been exposed to is essentially, the overreaction of the immune system is what's causing like this cytokine storm, the interferon reaction. And the reason why it's going into our respiratory system so much is because there's so many ACE2 receptors in our lungs and in our heart. And I think it's the IL-6 inflammatory cytokine that binds to the ACE2 receptor. So when people are thinking about, okay, I want to go back to work, things are reopening, and that they have the understanding that the state that their immune system is in, or just the state that they're in, period, emotionally, their mindset, their physical health, all that stuff should really be the focus in order to protect themselves from getting really, really sick or ill. And I was going through a lot of papers and doing a lot of research. And one of the things that stood out to me that was interesting is the capillaries in the lungs that have these ACE2 receptors around them. They also have lymphatic lymphocytes or lymphatic ducts, the smaller ones. Are those lymphocytes?
Yeah. So you have a significant amount of, you have lymph everywhere. Billions of lymphatic capillaries everywhere. And you've got some just some I could say are salt, that's skin associated lymphoid tissue. So you have lymph in your skin. You have mucus associated lymphoid tissue. That's called MALT. And it's in places that are mucousy, which is pretty much every orifice that you've got, right? Around your lungs, there's a lot of mucus in there, your sinuses, your mouth, your urethra, all those areas. And you've got BALT, which is called bronchial associated lymphoid tissue. And then you have GALT, gut associated lymphoid tissue. All this lymph sits around places where bad shit gets into your body. Like most toxins get in because you eat the damn stuff, or they bleed in through your skin, or you inhale it. So that's why you have a lot of lymph there, because the lymph has got to say, oh man, this is not going to be good. I better go around here, right? And then, so that's going to be one of the key things. And, the symptoms that people get from stuff are the symptoms that the body gives you because it's trying to help you. You sneeze and you cough and all these things are because your body's trying to give you all these responses to just kill that stuff. Yep. And then we blame it as a part of, this is the thing that's causing this to happen. I'm like, no, your immune system is actually doing what it's designed to do. And it can just get maladapted sometimes and doesn't know when to stop. But it's only as good as the system in and of itself when you get exposed to something. And if you just type in and you look up virus in there, you'll find, most people probably have anyway, like the way you said. They're technically not living organism. They're just floating around waiting for something to attach to. But so if they're gonna attach to something, they'll attach to it. But you don't have the same response in every person. It kind of goes back to what we said before. And then anything that you would do to strengthen your immune system is no different from COVID than any other damn virus you want to put a stupid name on. It's not the virus, it's the immune system. So you do anything and everything to try to strengthen that up. And it's the stuff that we already know. You got to decrease stress in your life. You got to exercise. You got to move. You got to breathe. You got to not eat absolute shit food all the time, right? That is going to affect your system. And do you, what's your nutrition like? What's your supplementation like? And I think I read somewhere now where they're linking metabolic syndrome and things with blood sugar levels or diabetes with your susceptibility to COVID. I'm like, well, no shit, Sherlock. I mean, thanks for the common sense. I mean, if you think about it logically, I'm getting upset here because we just somehow lose our brain that we're all victims of something. And I'm like, well, your body at that moment with what you're dealing with is susceptible. And here's the thing that people need to understand. Just because you're 21 years old doesn't mean you're healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And just because you look great on the outside doesn't mean you're healthy at all. I mean, I've got people you got kids that are 7, 8 years old and they got autoimmune diseases. Age has nothing to do with the health of your immune system at all. So people are flabbergasted that 20, 21-year-old people are getting this virus. Why? I mean, it's still the same terrain that it's going to be going after, or susceptibility. We don't know maybe what those triggers are for people. They're still going to try to figure that out. But I have people that look amazing in a mirror, and they're the most inflamed hot mess I've ever seen. And they just don't know it because they don't have any symptoms yet. The operative word is yet. But if you're vulnerable like that, and then you have something that comes along like a virus or a parasite that will now tax your system to a degree that it can't fight back that and deal with everything else that it has, then you're going to manifest something. You're going to manifest something. So it's the same thing. It's just strengthening up your immune system is stuff that you would do for, I don't care what kind of antigen you're trying to deal with. It's still the same thing, fundamentals and basics. And I posted up something about how, and actually got disabled and deleted from Facebook from putting it up. That's how batshit nuts that we are. If you don't follow the narrative of what they want you to say. And it was a research article that had been shared 37,000 times, and it was on nature.com. And it was a scientific, evidence-based article. And it said the severity of your COVID infection is linked to lymphopenia, which means a decrease in your lymphocytes, your white blood cells. And I posted something up about that. Well, that's just logical that if I don't have a lot of white blood cells, I'm going to be more susceptible to getting sick. And if you can do something to increase your white blood cells, maybe you won't get it. I mean, does that make sense to you? So I put that up there, and then all of a sudden I get deleted because I'm spreading misinformation about COVID. And I'm like, all I did was post a scientific article up that goes against your narrative of what you think is causing everything. And that's the kind of batshit crazy world we're living in right now.
Well, and I want to touch on that too, as long as we don't run out of time. But, you know, I want your feedback on this real quick, just because I want to give people some things to consider. Because here's the thing, man, like, don't believe what anybody says. You should question everything. You should test how you feel. You should check in with your heart. How does it feel? How does that information feel? Does it resonate with you? Does it not resonate with you? And if it resonates with you, try it, give it a shot, journal about it, have some objective information, and then make your own informed decision. But people, through, like, you know, confirmation bias and the Dunning-Kruger effect and all these psychological things that go on, people just attach themselves onto the narrative that's going to support their personality structure. And it becomes a religious thing. It becomes this, you know, you become a zealot, like a COVID warrior or a social justice warrior or whatever the thing is. And I'm not saying that all of those people and all of those things are bad, but they're only looking at it through one particular lens. So some of the research that I was doing was talking about how the epithelial cells around the alveoli have or create macrophages, which are basically the white blood cells and the part of the immune system, T cells, stuff like that. And I might have some of the details there wrong, that help protect you. And there are pro and anti-inflammatory versions of those, because there's inflammation if it's acute, is part of the healing process. It's the chronic inflammation and the inability to get it out that makes your aquarium full of fish shit, right? And so when there's pro and anti-inflammatory macrophages, you have to try to understand that if you do not have the right precursors, nutrients, the right terrain for those macrophages to be anti-inflammatory when they need to be anti-inflammatory and pro-inflammatory when they need to be pro-inflammatory, then you might be kicking yourself into an immune response, that whole trigger word cytokine storm, if you don't have the right information. And so I was digging deep into this. And so one of the things that I found was that vitamin A and vitamin D, particularly vitamin D from the sun, and Jack Cruz goes way into this, and hopefully we have time to at least talk for a minute about him, but vitamin D and vitamin A allow the macrophages to produce something that's called cathelicidin antimicrobial proteins, or CAMPs. And so when you have vitamin A and D there, the macrophage will become anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial, and it's creating these proteins that produce lysosome activity that glycolizes the ACE2 receptor site from the cytokine IL-6 to be able to bind to it. And hydroxychloroquine, which is the big drug in the media right now, actually does a pretty good job of the same thing, but it has 63 side effects. So it's like, should you be taking hydroxychloroquine, or should you be getting some damn sunlight and eating some liver with eating some good vitamin A, And the same thing goes with vitamin C. Vitamin C is more when you're farther down the road. Like if you're really getting hit hard by COVID-19, the intravenous vitamin C, it has been shown to be extremely effective. And this is one of the things that's concerning for me, because when I'm confused about a situation, I always ask myself, who's making money off of it, right? Follow the money, right? So I have personal friends, people I know, who shut down their manufacturing and machining businesses to produce ventilators in California, because Newsom was like, hey, we need all the ventilators we can get. If you have the ability to make them, buy them, right? All this normal thing, pumped all these ventilators. There was thousands of them. And then you went and said, all right, I got all the ventilators, dude, here they are. And they're like, oh yeah, we got a better deal overseas, so you can just keep those. So his business was shut down. He invested all this time, energy, and money into producing these ventilators, and then they didn't even take him from him. And what I'm curious about is, if there is this cytokine storm, there is not the CAMPs, the cathelicidin in the and the macrophages of the alveoli in the lungs, if those are already not there, and then you put someone on a ventilator where you're just pumping the same air in and out passively into that person, I don't see that moving around a whole lot of fluid. I don't see a whole lot of healthy diaphragmatic activity happening. I don't see abs, obliques, intercostals, like they're not, and plus they're probably laying down. They're probably not moving around too much. So, when I started looking into this and who's making money off of this stuff, the stock for hydroxychloroquine, which is I think a France company that makes it, skyrocketed. Ventilator companies are making tons of money. It's blowing up. So it's just really interesting to me, where it's like, okay, vaccines, which first of all, you cannot sue the government or a medical institution for any adverse reaction to a vaccine. And if you do, and the person dies, the statute of limitations is $250,000. So there's very low liability for the pharmaceutical industries, specifically for vaccines. Because if you took some other pharmaceutical and it killed you, you could sue them for millions, but there's this weird protection around vaccines. There's this weird little, bubble or conspiracy or whatever the hell you want to call it, if you want to go there with that. So vitamin A, vitamin D, and vitamin C are being shown as equally effective as hydroxychloroquine in preventing people from really getting the serious side effects of COVID-19, but they have very little to no side effects as long as they're dosed properly and they're sourced properly, and they talk to someone like you who knows what you're talking about, or an MD or someone else. So just wanted to get that out there, guys. Like, there's things that you can do that can help protect you from this when life gets back to normal. Like just giving your terrain the right tools and information and like that.
Yeah, well, you know, vitamin C is a natural antiviral. They used to give that out for viruses all the time. That's just what it does. And then, yeah, it's interesting because I had Jack Cruz on my podcast recently, and he's a good friend. It was his second time back, and
Can't wait to
probably
listen to it.
he's probably the smartest human I've ever talked to. And man, he went off on COVID and vaccines. You'll like this one, man. Holy cow! But yeah, I mean, it's interesting because he talked about vitamin D, and my friend Dr. Ben Lynch, who wrote the book Dirty Genes, talks about it. That you ain't going to be getting much of that when they're telling you to stay in your damn house. So you're doing the exact opposite of what you're supposed to do. And heaven forbid, you actually mentioned that if you take vitamin D or vitamin C or something like that, that you could strengthen your immune system to help you against the virus. That they'll just tell you that you're giving out misinformation, which is absolutely insane in my mind for that. And you have to look at, when we talked about systems, many problems happen very far downstream from a problem in a system, which medicine loves to go after the problem that's staring them right in the face. But they have a very difficult time going back to factors that contributed to that happening and in the system that could have been 15 steps prior. And then that changed things, it disrupted things, and then it manifests later. But we're only treating like what we're seeing right in front of us. And one of the key that people forget about is I talk about vitamins, but they don't mention minerals much. Mm-hmm. And they don't mention enzymes very much. And your whole body is one freaking gigantic enzyme reaction, and enzymes run the show. That's what the Krebs cycle is. The Krebs cycle is an enzymatic reaction. It's making ATP in your mitochondria. That's cellular energy, so you can make new cells. And I've always said that chronic disease occurs when you lose the ability to make new cells that work. Because if you can make new cells that work, you wouldn't freaking have chronic disease. Yes. And so what do you need to make new cells that work? Well, they need nutrients, they need oxygen, they need energy, and they got to get rid of toxins. But here's the thing. The enzymes, which run the show, which make ATP, enzymes don't work without minerals. Minerals are a catalyst that kick off enzymes. So if you're deficient in minerals, you're going to be deficient in enzymes. And then I got news for you. If you're a human being on this planet, you have mineral deficiency because stress depletes minerals. We eat absolute shit food. And the food that we do eat is grown in soil that doesn't have minerals in it anymore. And then when we have mineral deficiencies in the great mind of medicine, they tell you, well, if you're low on something, just take more of it, instead of asking why the hell you're low in it. And then there's always a balance. You can't just have low here and then give it to bring it up, because something else is going to go down. That's just the way it works. And it's the same with hormones. Well, you're low on testosterone. Let me just give you more testosterone. How about no? How about you figure out the balance of the system that caused that to happen? Mm-hmm. So if you just take something fundamental like that, of making sure that you're getting your mineral intake, it can make a huge difference on how enzymes work. And then enzymes are going to make a difference on how the energy systems work, which maybe, just maybe, that might make a difference on how strong your immune system is. But what the hell do minerals have to do with your immune system is what that they'll say today. And I'm like, well, pretty much everything, brother. And here's the thing. I'm not saying that you don't need these things that conventional medicine has. What I'm saying is that maybe you won't need as much or as often if you take care of these other things first in conjunction with it, because I know that if you don't take care of those and you just deal with the roadblock in front of you, trust me, you're going to have an ass kicking coming later with some other disease name that's going to hit you. You just don't know when, but it'll manifest itself whenever it wants. And then we'll just label it. I think we have like over 10,000 disease names in the physician reference of disease. Right. And think about that. Think about that. That's insane, right? And to me, you know, the chronic ones are all due from the same thing, chronic inflammation. That's what it's from, right? And this makes you, and chronic inflammation makes you susceptible to infectious disease.
Yeah.
So it always comes back down to that. And then that's my take.
Yeah. So I want to respect your time. So whenever you're done, just tell me. But there's
I got about 15 more minutes. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So if you want to pick one of these topics or one or two, and we can go through them. There's some ideas or things that I want to glean your insight on. So, you know, the ability for us to detoxify ourselves and regenerate cells and have new cells that work, the lymphatic system is a huge component of that, correct?
Of detoxification? Oh yeah, it's huge. I mean, it's a primary detoxification thing of your body. I mean, most of your body organs are there for that purpose, for detoxification. I mean, almost every single freaking one of them plays a role of detox. The lymphatic one is by far the most neglected. And here's how systems work. Let's say you have 7 systems that detoxify your body, which is approximately what it is, and even more. If something goes wrong with one of those systems, then the other 6 got to carry the load.
Yep.
Right? And then trust me, one of those other 6 is probably a mess too. Then you're probably only going to have 1 or 2 well-functioning detoxification systems. And that means that they get overloaded. And one of the classic ones that you have is that when the lymphatic system goes and doesn't function well, then the skin takes a beating, because the skin is a major detoxification system of your body. That's what sweat is. And you've actually, through a very cool thing with nature, most of the lymph in your body is in the skin too. Mm-hmm. So then your body will actually start to detoxify more from the skin. So you'll usually get a lot of skin conditions of whatever damn name you want to give it of the day, and that you'll get there. Or you'll manifest it with something else. The lungs also are a huge detox organ. That's what breathing is. You breathe out oxidation through oxidative stress. So you exhale toxins all the time, and then you inhale toxins all the time.
So my question, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, because just because it's kind of a specific question, and what you just said was great, and I appreciate it. So out of all these detoxification systems, would you say that it's an accurate statement that water is a common denominator for all of them? Because you said that lymph is mostly water, everything's mostly water, right? So if water is the common denominator, which you can tell me if it is or not in a second, if water is kind of this common denominator, which I would think it is because you die without it, period, then what I find really interesting is if there's all this lymphatic structures and systems that are so close to the skin, the neck, all of these areas, and they're made mostly out of water, those are all areas that get a lot of exposure to light. And water has a very, very similar structure to quartz crystal, the way the structure is. It's almost like a liquid crystal, right? And so crystalline structures, specifically water, can transmit and retain information, right? So when it comes to the detoxification systems of our body, how do you look at it through the lens of the health of the water that's in your body, the health of the water that you're drinking? Because, and Jack Cruz gets way down into this when it comes down to like the different isotopes of hydrogen and EZ water and like all this other stuff we don't have time for, but how does water play a role in that? And do you have any suggestions for people on how they could get either more bioavailable water, more freely flowing water, anything like that? Because for me, it's sun exposure, native electromagnetic frequencies, or natural electromagnetic frequencies, negative ions, proper breathing, stuff like that. Deuterium depleted water is good. So like with water being the common denominator of all these detoxification processes, what protocols do you use when it comes to water and how you interact with water?
Yeah, I mean, no surprise, water is sort of maybe kind of a little important to life, right? Most of the earth is in it, and you're mostly water as well. The lymph is 90% water. So, and your brain is a huge amount too. And most people are in a state of perpetual dehydration, even when they drink water. So I find that a lot is that people drink plenty of water, but like what we said before, just because you drink it doesn't mean you're absorbing it at all. And if you think about water, there's no place in the human body where there's pure water anywhere. So drinking pure water is not the best way to get water. What you have to do is you have to structure the water. That means put something in it or do something to it. One of the easiest ways you can structure water is through light.
Yep.
Right? You can expose it to moonlight, sunlight. You can actually put crystals in water, and then there you go. That will structure it as well. And then you can put something else in there of anything. Honestly, we could put like a piece of a plant in there, a leaf in there, a lemon in there. I usually will do essential oils all the time for me because essential oils have the highest energy of pretty much anything on the earth.
Yep.
And they will really, really do a great job of, it's called structured water. And when you do that, then it's much easier for the actual water molecules to go in through the cell, because when people have they have a poorly functioning lymphatic system, basically they have a lot of toxins around the cells and what they call the interstitial fluid. And then the body actually takes the water that you have and it leaves it outside the cell to try to take down the toxicity, the acidic environment. It tries to decrease it with water retention. And then it just stays in as much as it can, or you just pee it right out and it doesn't go into the cell. So people say, I drink water all the time. I mean, how can I be dehydrated? I'm like, well, it's like food. Just because you eat food doesn't mean you're absorbing it. If you got a gut that's a hot mess and you got leaky gut or holes in your gut, how do you know you got leaky gut? Yes, because you're alive on this planet, you got leaky gut. And so the number one way that I tell people to help structure their water is very simple. You put liquid dirt in it, and that's called fulvic and humic minerals or trace minerals. So I want you to think about what I just told you there. Enzymes can't work without minerals. Mother Nature is pretty damn smart. She's got everything you need. So you take trace minerals, which are fulvic and humic minerals. They'll give you every mineral that you need, and your body will take what it wants from what it's missing. And then you'll structure water at the same time. You'll start to detoxify yourself, because fulvic and humic detoxify liver and kidneys quite nicely. And they're binders, so they'll bind to bad shit that you have in your system. And you'll absorb more water, and you'll kick off enzymatic reactions, and you'll make more ATP, and you'll have a lot more energy, and you'll be resilient just from putting a few drops of liquid Mother Earth in your damn water.
Yep.
So that's what I would do. I don't drink regular water anymore. There's always something in it. I have these cool flasks that have the crystals in the bottom, and then that you can go, and so that'll do the same thing for it. And
do you know what an arc crystal is?
What?
Have you heard of an arc crystal?
No.
So I say this again on every podcast. I just want to get it out there real quick, because I know, and then I want to ask you one last quick question, then I'll let you go. So the Resonance Science Foundation, which was founded by Nassim Haramein and has been kind of funded by one of my personal superheroes, Robert Edward Grant, have looked at they've basically unified quantum physics. There is actually a full understanding now, and it's just kind of scary that this isn't on the news, because everyone knows who Einstein is, and no one knows who these pioneers are. Because at first, you know, when there's this leap in worldview shift, you're a heretic, and you're gonna get put up on the cross or burned or whatever. And then after you're dead, usually some other people that are less polarizing look at your shit and they're like, oh wait, this dude was actually right. The Earth isn't at the center of the solar system, and blah 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 blah. Like, you know, all of these different components to that. So Nassim and Robert Edward Grant really kind of took unified quantum field theory in ancient cultures, which ancient cultures directly experienced this through mindfulness, meditation, like all of these things that consciousness has the ability to do, like structure water. You can actually structure water with pure intent and consciousness, because that's a vibration and a frequency. And what they aimed to do was to try to reverse engineer the Ark of the Covenant in the Bible, because in the Bible, it actually gives you very clear specifications of the size and the shape and what it did and all this other stuff. So you can buy one of these. My dad has one. They're like $1,200, and you can't really see it here, but it's the symbol for my therapy company. It's the Vector Equilibrium, and they grow in a lab a perfect symmetrical quartz crystal in the shape of a vector equilibrium. Then they put it in a magnetic chamber, and then they put it inside of another chamber that's basically a Faraday cage that has a superfluid crystal matrix inside of the middle, and it's filled with a plasma, and they spin it extremely fast, and it basically creates the same electromagnetic frequency that a star would create. And so then all those quartz crystals co-resonate with that frequency, and that's the frequency of the vacuum. That's the universal frequency. And so they've actually proven this now, that these little art crystals, these little structured pieces of quartz, actually emit photons. Everything emits photons, but actually emits photons. So you can put your art crystal underneath a bottle of water, and it creates a toroidal energy field that then structures that water into the right, most bioavailable shape. And the research we've done on plant growth and animal health and all this stuff is crazy. It could revolutionize agriculture. So definitely check them out. And I think you'd be really interested in their work. And if you ever want to do another podcast, dude, I've taken all their courses and I'd love to talk about it. But it looks like you have to go, but I just have to say this, and hopefully we get to connect again, man, because I really want to get into how all this relates to electromagnetic fields, 5G, polyunsaturated fatty acids, and a handful of other things when it comes to cellular health and all that stuff. So if you want to comment on that, you can, but I know you have to go. And yeah, so I just wanted to get that out there.
Cool, man. Well, thank you. I enjoyed it. I had a really good time. It went very fast.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. If you're not already following Stop Chasing Pain, definitely worth the time. Even just listening to the podcast, definitely sign up for the membership. Check out the Body Aquarium and Lymphatic Mojo. It's awesome work. I can't wait till this quarantine's over and I can come out and meet you and learn this face to face and share that energy in that space with you. If you haven't checked out our page, 0 Point Athletics, on Instagram, or my personal therapy page, divergent.therapeutics, you can check that out. And I'm pretty sure that's pretty much a wrap, man. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate what you're doing and who you are. And I really hope we get to do this again and dive a little deeper.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Take care, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.
Love is all, man. Peace.
You bet.